Colonel Ray Dobbins had 30 years of service, a chest full of ribbons, and exactly zero patience for a woman standing in his hangar in a flight suit 2 sizes too clean. "You're in the wrong hangar, sweetheart," he said, not even looking up from his clipboard. "Simulator's 2 buildings over. This one's for people who actually fly." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She just reached into her jacket, pulled out a badge, and set it in his hand. He looked down. His face changed. Because the name on that badge wasn't a visitor's pass. It was his new commanding officer's. Stick around, because what happens in the next 10 seconds of this story is the moment that ends careers, and this one is only the beginning. If you love stories about quiet people who turn out to be the most powerful person in the room, hit subscribe right now, because this channel is full of them, and a new one drops every week. 6 months earlier, the whispers had already started at Marlow Air Force Base. A new commander was being assigned to the 118th Fighter Wing, one of the most decorated tactical units on the East Coast. Nobody knew who it would be. Rumors ran wild. A hard-nosed general from the Pentagon, a war hero pulled out of retirement, someone from Air Combat Command with a reputation for firing people on day one. What nobody expected was for the answer to walk into the hangar in civilian clothes, alone, without an entourage, without an announcement, and ask a maintenance sergeant where she could find base operations. That sergeant didn't recognize her either, because Brigadier General Elena Cross didn't look like what people expected a 2-star general to look like. She was 51, soft-spoken, 5'4", and she had learned decades ago that the loudest person in a room is rarely the most dangerous one. She had flown combat missions before half the pilots on this base were born. She had commanded a squadron in her 30s when most of her peers were still lieutenants. She had turned down a desk job at the Pentagon twice because she wanted to stay close to the flight line, close to the people who actually did the work. And today, her first official day of command, she wanted to see the base the way it really was, not the version they'd polish for a general's welcome ceremony. So she skipped the ceremony. She put on a plain flight suit with no insignia, tucked her ID into her jacket, and walked straight into Hangar 3, the busiest, most high-pressure hangar on base, to watch how people actually worked when they didn't think anyone important was watching. That's how she ended up standing near the F-16s at 0700 hours, watching a crew chief argue with a lieutenant about fuel logs, when a voice behind her said the words that would follow him for the rest of his career. "You're in the wrong hangar, sweetheart." Colonel Ray Dobbins was the operations group commander, the man who, until about 4 minutes ago, believed he was about to be the second highest-ranking officer on this base under the new general. He was good at his job. Nobody could deny that. 28 years in the Air Force, 3 combat deployments, a reputation for running the tightest flight line in the wing. But he also had a well-known habit of deciding who mattered in a room within about 6 seconds of meeting them, and he almost never checked his math. He saw a woman in a flight suit with no rank insignia standing near his jets, notepad in hand, watching his crew a little too closely. In his mind, that could only mean one thing: a contractor, a journalist, or someone's spouse who'd wandered somewhere she shouldn't be. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area," he said, walking toward her. "You need to be behind the yellow line." She nodded once, calm. "I'll move. I just wanted to see how the morning checks run." That should have been the end of it. But Ray Dobbins was having a bad morning, a delayed shipment, a broken part, and a lieutenant who couldn't get his paperwork straight, and something about her stillness irritated him. She wasn't scared. She wasn't scrambling to explain herself the way visitors usually did. So he pushed a little further. "You a reporter? Because if you're here for a story, you're going to want to talk to public affairs, not stand around my jets." "I'm not a reporter." "Then who let you in here?" That's when he said it, the line that would end up echoing through the entire base by the end of the week. "Listen, sweetheart, I don't know what you think this is, but you're in the wrong hangar. This one's for people who actually fly." A few of the younger airmen nearby went very quiet. She held his eyes for a moment. Then, without a word, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a black leather folder. She opened it and held it out to him. He looked down. His stomach dropped. Brigadier General Elena Cross, Commander, 118th Fighter Wing. If a story like this, quiet competence walking into a room full of assumptions, is the kind of thing you love watching unfold, make sure you're subscribed, because we've got dozens more waiting for you, and this one is about to get so much more interesting. For 3 full seconds, Ray Dobbins didn't move. He read the name again, as if it might change the second time. It didn't. Every airman in that hangar had gone dead silent, several of them suddenly finding urgent business with their toolboxes, refusing to make eye contact with either of them. "General Cross," Ray finally said, his voice noticeably smaller than it had been 30 seconds earlier. I had no idea. I apologize, ma'am. You don't need to apologize to me," she said evenly, closing the folder and slipping it back into her jacket. "You need to think about why you said it in the first place." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "I've been in this uniform for 26 years, Colonel," she continued. "I've been mistaken for a lot of things walking through hangars. A spouse, a contractor, a secretary, once even a cleaning crew supervisor. I've stopped being surprised by it. What I haven't stopped noticing is how quickly some people decide someone doesn't belong before they've bothered to find out who they are." "Ma'am, I meant no disrespect." "I know you didn't think you did," she said. "That's actually the part that worries me." She turned to look at the F-16s behind them, then back at him. "I'm not here to make an example of you in front of your crew, Colonel. I'm here to run this wing. But I want you to understand something clearly, right now, in this hangar, in front of these airmen. The next time you decide someone doesn't belong somewhere, I'd think a little harder before you say it out loud." She paused. "Because you don't always get lucky enough to find out who you insulted before it costs you something." She turned and walked toward base operations, leaving him standing there in front of his own crew, in his own hangar, holding nothing but the memory of the word "sweetheart" hanging in the air like it might never fully go away. By 0900 hours, the story had already spread across the base faster than any official memo could have. By noon, it had a nickname, the Hangar Incident. By the end of the day, half the officers on base had heard some version of it, some accurate, some wildly exaggerated. One rumor even claiming General Cross had relieved Dobbins of command on the spot. She hadn't. That wasn't her style. But the fact that people believed she might have tells you everything about the kind of respect she'd already earned in less than 8 hours. Colonel Dobbins spent the rest of that day in something close to a fog. He kept replaying the moment in his head, kept hearing his own voice say, "Sweetheart," like it belonged to some other man, some younger, dumber version of himself who hadn't learned anything in 28 years. That evening he did something he almost never did. He requested a meeting with her, not because he had to, but because he needed to say something in private that he hadn't been able to say in front of his crew. She agreed to see him at 1800 hours. He walked into her office, half expecting a court-martial. What he got instead was worse. In a way, she simply gestured to the chair across from her desk and waited. "I came to apologize properly," he said. "Not because I have to. Because what I said this morning wasn't about not recognizing your rank. It was about not even considering that you might outrank me. And that's on me, not my eyesight." She studied him for a long moment. "That's a more honest answer than I expected, Colonel." "I've been doing this job a long time," he continued. "Long enough that I stopped asking questions and started assuming answers. That's a dangerous habit for a commander to have. You just proved that to me in about 4 seconds. She leaned back in her chair. "I'm not going to pretend this morning didn't happen, Colonel. And I'm not going to pretend it didn't matter. But I've also read your file. 28 years, 3 deployments, the tightest flight line in this wing, according to every report I've read. I don't need to break a good officer to teach him a lesson. I need him to teach himself one, and it looks like this morning already did that. So where does that leave us, ma'am? She almost smiled. It leaves us exactly where we were supposed to start, with you finding out who's actually in command of this wing, and both of us finding out whether you're the kind of officer who learns from that, or the kind who just gets quieter about it. Over the following months, something in Ray Dobbins visibly shifted. He didn't become a different person overnight. That's not how real change works, and General Cross wasn't interested in performances. But the airmen under his command started noticing small things. He asked more questions before making assumptions. He stopped interrupting junior officers mid-sentence. When a new engineer showed up on the flight line, young, quiet, easy to overlook, he made a point of asking her name and her specialty before deciding what she was doing there. 6 months later, during a joint training exercise, that same engineer identified a stress fracture in a wing mount that 3 senior technicians had missed. It likely prevented a catastrophic failure mid-flight. Ray Dobbins was the one who recommended her for a commendation. When General Cross asked him what changed his mind about listening more carefully to people he might otherwise have overlooked, he thought about it for a long moment. "I got handed a badge in a hangar 6 months ago," he said. "Best lesson I ever got without actually getting fired for it." She allowed herself a small, rare smile. "That's the only lesson worth learning twice, Colonel. The one that cost you your pride instead of your career." By the end of her first year in command, the 118th Fighter Wing posted its highest readiness scores in nearly a decade. General Cross never mentioned the hangar incident again in any official capacity. She didn't need to. Everyone on that base already understood exactly what kind of commander she was, and exactly what kind of mistake it was to assume otherwise. What would you have done in Colonel Dobbins' position, standing in that hangar, realizing exactly who you'd just insulted? Would you have apologized on the spot like he eventually did? Or do you think pride would have gotten in the way first? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to know how you think you would have reacted in that moment. If this story hit you the way it hit me while I was writing it, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button, because we post a brand new story just like this one every single week. Stories about quiet people who turn out to be the most powerful person in the room. And if you want to make sure you never miss one, tap the notification bell too. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next one.